Okay, folks, so we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I'll be your friendly dungeon muser this evening because today we are going to do a look back. It is, at the time of recording, January 1, 2025, and I'm going to look back at the year that was 2024. I'm going to double check and make sure the stream is going live here, so bear with me a moment. It does appear that it is. Okay. So then, for those listening at home, welcome. This is the end of, I think, what is likely the busiest year we've had on the Dungeon Musings channel. And if you are new here, we are a channel that runs a bunch of actual play sessions of a variety of different games. This year, we have managed to run more than we've run any other previous year as far as getting different games to the table. If you are an old hat here, well then, congratulations, and I hope that you have enjoyed our 9th year on the channel, starting at the end of this month. I guess we'll be hitting our 10-year anniversary, so this will be 2025 will represent the 10th year of the Dungeon Musings channel. As is customary with this type of yearly overview, what I intend on doing is going through some of the games we ran over the last year, sharing some thoughts on those. I've got 2 different things I want to talk about in that category. Not only standouts that were games that we had not run quite, either not a lot or hadn't run a great deal before. I'm going to talk about the ones that were standouts for ongoing campaigns, and in those I'm not going to talk about the actual ongoing campaigns we have with those games. I'm talking more about the games themselves, and I want to talk about what I found was good or at least effective about those games that lend themselves to ongoing campaigns. I'm going to talk about the plans we've got for our charity initiatives for next year. We'll talk about the charity initiatives in this year as well. So we had 2 different kind of stages of that. We are going to talk about the player picks. What I did for this year, at the last 2 months of the year, I asked the players to pick their top 4 games, all the players in the roster, and we did a ranked choice voting for it, and we saw the 6 games that came out on top for games that the players would like to see to the channel this year. So I've got a list of those. I'm going to talk about my to-do for this coming year for 2025, and I'll compare that to last year's to-do list as well. And then I just got some oddball stuff that I want to talk about as well, as far as certain things we tried on the channel this year, and what my thoughts were, as far as how effective those were, how not effective they were. And then we're going to take questions. So if you have any questions that come up over the course of the video or that you've had before, I'll look in chat. I see we've got some folks in there already. Hey, Engolf, hey, THX, hey, Graham. I hope you all are having a great first day of your 2025, as I do hope for everybody. So for this year, let's start with the games on the channel. That's what we do here. So we last year ran 32 different games over the course of the year, and that's individual games that we got to the table for a minimum, 2 or 3 hour session. Typically a 3-hour session. Our 2-hour sessions are only on our Wednesdays. This year we got 45 games to the table, which is more than we've ever done before. It is not a metric that I really care to try and pursue in future. It meant that we had a lot of games crammed in the first 6 months of the year. The latter half of the year was not quite as hectic. And while it's really, really great to be able to try out so many different games, it is also nice to spend time with certain games and allow you to see what happens with them over the course of regular play. The games we ran this year, I might as well go through the list, are D&D 5th edition, Mongoose Publishing's Conan RPG, Pathfinder 2nd edition, Savage Superheroes, Soulbound, Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition, Rogue Trader, Traveler 2nd edition, Starfinder, Savage Pathfinder, Godbound, Elder Scrolls RPG, that's the unofficial one, Wrath and Glory, the 40k RPG, The Walking Dead RPG, Dragon Age, Cypher. We ran a we used We Are All Mad here as the source book for it, but it's just really generic cipher system that I drew some other stuff from. The West End Games Star Wars RPG, Imperium Maledictum, Shadowrun, 6th edition, Age of Rebellion, the Star Wars RPG, GURPS, 4th edition, 7th Sea, 2nd edition, Cult, Divinity Lost, one of my favorites, War Stories, great Year Zero engine World War II game, Alien RPG, published by Freya Lagan, Vampire 5th edition, Alternity, the classic TSR science fiction game, Barbarians of Lemuria, Fallout RPG, Marvel Multiverse RPG, that's the current Marvel RPG, Lex Arcana, Conan Hyborian Age, that's the upcoming release from Monolith. We used a hack of Homeworld 2D20 for a Traveler session, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, Star Trek Adventures 1st edition and 2nd edition, Blackbirds, Pathfinder 1st edition, Acton Cthulhu 2D20, Fabula Ultima, The One Ring 2nd edition, Zweihander, Ars Magica 5th edition, Mithras Classic Fantasy, and which is a RuneQuest 6th edition as well, and Twilight 2000. So that was a lot of games. The nice thing with running so many different kinds of games was an opportunity to see a bunch of different types of, of approaches to running. Looking back on the list, while we have a really big list here, one thing that is noticeable is only one of those is really what you'd call a story game. So story games I'm using to include Cult Divinity Lost, City of Mist, Powered by the Apocalypse, Blades in the Dark or Forged in the Dark games. I only ran one of those, and in past I have run or tried to run more of those, and they haven't been terribly successful. At least I didn't feel like I didn't do a good job with them, or I didn't feel like there was a good interface with them. But as much as we did get a ton of games to the channel, it's interesting that, I don't know, for a game that a genre of RPG that I was quite interested in a few years back, only one of them got to the table this year, and only one time. There are other story game type games that I have been interested in before that I have not yet run, like Monster of the Week. There's some that looks really, really interesting, and there's an upcoming release for, I can't remember what it's called, Tales of the Mist. It's a fantasy version of City of Mist, and so I don't know. Like I don't necessarily want to like give myself homework for these things, but I feel like there are lessons I learned from running those types of games that I don't get from running more traditional RPGs, more simulationist stuff. And it might be good in the coming year to consider adding more of those story game ones to the list, which, returning to the back to running so many trad games too, might be beneficial as well. Fate, I guess, might be a good option in there as well. So that's a lot of games. I thought maybe I'd start with the ones that were standouts for it. And I really wanted to, I'm late in starting this stream, so my apologies for that. In part because I really wanted to make sure I gave some thought to some of the stuff beforehand, to not suffer from recency bias. So there's a couple of games we've run in the recent couple of months that have been really, really great, and I didn't want those to overshadow ones that earlier in the year that I ran. So I made a conscious effort to look through and think of the 6 games that really were standouts of ones that we don't typically run on the channel. So those are the ones I want to talk about. I'm going to have some visual aids on the background for this that will help break up some things, but because there's so many games and I wanted to get the stream started, I've only done about half of the ones that I'm going to talk about. So this section I do have all of them, and I'm going to try and do them in alphabetical order here. So let's start with some of the ones that were standouts. First up is Kevin Crawford's very cool Godbound RPG. So this was something that we ran as part of our charity sessions for the first half of the year. So what we did for charity sessions this year, for those who are unfamiliar, all of our charity sessions are in support of the SOS Children's Villages International Charity. And what we did for the first half of the year was anybody who had donated, I can't remember if it was 100 or whatever, to the campaign last year, I asked all of them to tell me a game they'd like to play, and I'll prep a session for it. So we crammed all of those in. There's about 13 sessions in a 6-month period, and it was really exciting to write for so many different sessions. Godbound was a game actually that I selected because one of our players, Jeff, had requested just something to play with an outrageous power level. And there's a couple of games that might fit that kind of criteria, but Godbound felt like one that would be a best fit for a one-shot and for giving him what he wanted, which is like the ultimate kind of power fantasy. Godbound, if you're not familiar with it, is a old school, part of the kind of old school Renaissance school of games. It is one of his early without number games. So he has subsequently released a bunch of other ones. I don't know if Godbound predates Stars Without Number. I don't think it does. I think that came first. But Stars Without Number was his science fiction role-playing game. He then released Worlds Without Number, which was a fantasy one. He then did Cities Without Number, which was a cyberpunk one. And then currently in the Kickstarter has concluded, and he's in the midst of delivering for Ashes Without Number, which is a post-apocalyptic game. But all of his games share the same kind of, basic D&D style D20 core, but they're not OGL games. They have their own mechanics and they differ throughout all the different games. What Godbound features is a setting that is actually similar to one of the other games I'm going to talk about today, where the gods are dead or defeated by some external force that's an adversary in the world. And the heroes in this one, they become inheritors of those godly mantles. So you're effectively playing demigods who are on the pursuit to godhood. And we set up basically an idea that the idea for the one shot was that the players would be playing in good characters, like quote unquote good characters who inherited the mantles of evil gods, having defeated them. And that's where we went with it. And it was just, it really stood out because the scale of operation in the game, like there's not only the ability, like obviously you're a combat monster when you are a demigod and the game reflects that, but you're also capable of some really incredible feats. But there's great ways that the game lets the characters interact with the world itself, so they can interface with the world and change the world using their godly power. And there is a faction phase to this game, similar to what there is in Stars Without Number, if you're familiar with that. And what that does is it allows the players for their characters rather, to interact with the wider world as well. And I mean, in the sense of, acting against other city-states or acting against other nations or acting against wizard colleges or whatever. It is a really, really fascinating game that was very light on its feet. It felt really fun at the table, and it allowed for some really wild concepts, like someone was playing a incarnation of the Dragon of Fire, and someone was the Lich King, I think. It's just a really, really cool game, and I think that it really stood out as something that absolutely lived up to its promise of being this kind of ultimate power fantasy game. And I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity or possibility for it. This game, incidentally, too, like many of Kevin Crawford's games, you can get for free on PDF. There is a deluxe version that has a couple of extra rules in it, but you can go to DriveThruRPG and snag this for free still, if you want to check out the game for yourself. It's interesting to see what things have remained the same and what things have changed over the course of his design library, or the library of games that he's produced. But it's just a really, really interesting, really exceptional game that absolutely lived up to the promise of what I had for it. So that's number one. Number two, let's go down the list here. Number two, where are you? Boom. It's Lex Arcana. Lex Arcana is a game that is set in a fantasy version of the Roman Empire. It features characters playing members of the Cohor Auxiliaria Arcana, who are kind of like a investigative branch that report directly to the emperor. In this world, Rome didn't fall, and the world is full of magical kind of things. It is not an overtly magical setting the way that, like, Dungeons and Dragons settings are, but the characters definitely can make use of magic, and all of the characters can make use of rites and invocations. It has an investigative focus. It is exceptionally well designed. The same designer who worked on this, I'm not sure if he's the only or the primary designer, was behind the One Ring. I'm not gonna attempt his name. Frank is his first name. His last name is an Italian last name that I will not pronounce. Oh, actually, Nepatello. It's actually not that bad. And there are a couple of other people who are listed as the primary designers. The game and its supplements, in particular the Encyclopedia Arcana, it's among the very best stuff I've read. The game, because the setting has a lot of the same elements you would expect from a modern world where, you know, there's a lot of urbanization, there is mass communication, there is mass transport, there is a sense of a wider world. It just makes for, oh, hi, Anna. Anna says hi. Hi, sweetie. It makes for a world of investigation where the players aren't going to be suffering too much trying to figure out what they can and cannot do as investigators in this world. And it's also, because the characters all have access to different types of scrying rituals, it makes it a lot easier to kind of get the mystery, or the evidence and whatnot, or clues to the players. I've only run it twice so far, and it was twice this year, and both sessions left me with, questioning why I'm not running this more often. It's such an exceptional game. It's gorgeous. The options for advancement, like the road for advancement for characters, is enormous. So it feels like it's a game that you could play for a long time, and the experience point system wouldn't outpace the characters so that they would become unrecognizable at some point. And so it's really exceptional game. And it was David, one of our players, who requested it as one of his charity sessions. And I'm really glad he did, because I would have overlooked this game otherwise. We then ran it as a part of a mashup with the Masks of Nyarlathotep for part of our second half of the year, where we did mashups of different games. And man, like that, I could have run that as an ongoing campaign. Like if you wanted to, that would be a structure to run a campaign with this. Though there are some exceptional adventures, and there's a mega campaign that was kickstarted last year, I believe, maybe the earlier this year, but it's coming out soon too. That is a mega campaign for Lex Arcana. Just really exceptional game, and very different from a lot of the other investigative or historic games that we play. It also, I think, is very well suited for having. This is similar to the One Ring in the sense that there are rules for all different parts of the play that you're doing, whether it's role playing or travel or investigation or combat. There's solid rules for all of those different areas, and it has a tight focus on giving you only what you need just for that kind of game. So yeah, exceptional game. Really stood out to me. Next up is going to be, I don't have the physical copy of this because I don't know, to be honest, where it is right now, but I went pretty wild for the unofficial Elder Scrolls RPG about halfway through the year. This is a collaborative effort between a couple of designers who it's currently in its 3.4 version, and they're, I think, working on a 4th edition right now to sort of consolidate all the leftover rules that they had for it. The game has a lot of, parents, as it were. It owes some to Dark Heresy 1st edition. It owes some to Mithras or RuneQuest 6th edition. It owes some to some Savage Worlds I see in there. Some Zweihander I feel like there's in there. It's just an exceptional. I for myself, was not really familiar with Tamriel all that much, and as I got to know the setting and the games and played a little bit of Skyrim, I really liked came to like the setting. I watched some videos on Daggerfall and on Oblivion too, so I got a sense of what the story was in there. And it's a really, really intriguing setting. But all of that set aside, the game itself is so fucking good. It is a really, really well done game. There's a lot of opportunity for advancement as well, a lot of opportunity for diversity between characters. They do a really great job of capturing both the kind of the potential, lethality of some of those games, because some more than others are famously difficult, especially early on. From what like Daggerfall in particular is supposed to be very, very hard for its first, chunk of its story. So there is a sense of lethality, and like that your characters are not invulnerable to things, but your characters are also quite competent and have really interesting powers and abilities. So it's a really cool combination of competent characters and really fun, in the moment decisions that players are making in combat, and that, GM's adversaries or monsters have as well. We ran not 10, but for close to 10 sessions of it, I think. Maybe we did run 10, but it's one of those games where it is still right now in the process of they're tinkering out the last bits for the 3.4 version. So with the rules having changed while we were running it, that might have been part of the reason we set it aside. But also, it was up until when I took my holiday in July, when I always take my break, and I typically come back and run something different when I come back from the holidays. So it's a game, while we didn't talk about it or run it quite a bit in the second half of the year, it's one of the best games that I've run this year, and it's astounding that it's done by a bunch of fans. Not that they're not capable of great, game design or anything like that. Just it is such a polished and well-designed game that it's wild to me to think that this is an unofficial product and not something that is actually being published by somebody. So yeah, love that game. You can instantly find that. I'm sorry. What I'll do afterwards, I'll put a link to try and pick that up to that game. Because if you do want to pick it up and check it out, it's a fan-made product. It's free, so it costs you nothing to check it out. And I really, really enjoyed running that game and designing characters for it too. We played with a lot of pre-gens in that one early on. Next up is probably not a surprise. This is one where I genuinely wanted to make sure I wasn't, just suffering from recency bias. But that's the One Ring RPG Second Edition, published by Free League. We have just, as of yesterday, concluded a 5-part adventure with that game, where we played used material from the Moria sourcebook and from two other adventure sourcebooks for it. I had limited experience with the first edition. I ran a one-shot set during the Gondorian Kinstrife that I really enjoyed prepping and running. And then I ran like 2 adventure sessions, I think, with it, and I played in 2. So I had limited, understanding of it, and I enjoyed it, but it felt kind of fiddly. And the newest edition has, sanded off all the burrs and all the rough bits for it, and it's just, it's an exceptionally well-designed game. Like, I don't think this is your go-to fantasy game for anything other than Tolkien-esque stories where characters suffer, weariness over travel. They suffer a darkening of the heart by way of the shadow falling on them. If you don't want journeys to, long travel and the accumulated fatigue that comes from that to be part of your play experience, it's probably not a good fit for you. But it felt exceptionally Tolkien, for one, but more importantly, it's a really fun game to play, and it's a fun game to run as well. It felt like there was always interesting decisions. There was always potential peril because of resource management issues. The players got a fair bit accomplished as well in the 5 sessions that we played. One of them was very much my thumb on the scale, but otherwise we spent 4 sessions with just, letting the players kind of go around and, sandbox to try and get themselves into Moria and figure a way in and then a way deeper down into it. And it was just great. Like, it was really fun seeing the decisions the players were making, not only in their planning stages, but also in response to things that were happening. The XP system in it, I think, is exceptional because it allows characters to start taking some interesting abilities, but it's a slow progress with it. It doesn't feel like they're suddenly transforming into superheroes. And if you were using the suggested timing of the different adventures, where one adventure occurs every season, then the roll of years happens over the course of our campaign, our mini campaign we played. It was 15 months that passed over the course of the session, 2 Yule sessions, and then the rest of them singular. Great game. Like it's again, like Lex Arcana, a very tightly designed game. It was exceptionally easy to run. There's some terrific source books out for it, and Moria is one of my favorite Mega Dungeon products. It is exceptional the way that they have managed to capture the feel or intent of, not intent, but the feel or the experience of Mega Dungeon runs, where you're going in, risking things, and then trying to get out, gain experience, gain knowledge, gain gear, and then go back in on a more powerful basis. And while it isn't a matter of the characters getting like, a +2 sword as opposed to a +1, or like, getting extra levels, what the players were achieving is information and knowledge that they could only get by going out over the course of the many adventures. I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone who may want to watch that or who may want to play Moria. I'm not going to spoil anything from that product here, but it's an exceptional game. Really, really well done. One of my favorites I've run this year. And if you have had experiences with first edition that you didn't enjoy, I would suggest maybe giving this one a try. If you like Tolkien, and if what I've said about the framing of the game and what the play experience is going to be like, really, really great stuff. I really cannot say enough good things about the One Ring, which may not be the last time you hear of it today. And the final one I want to talk about for the standouts, this one may not be a surprise either, because we ran one session of it before, and I kept talking about it quite a bit afterwards. That's Twilight 2000, another Free League game. Twilight 2000 is a game, the most recent recreation of the classic 80s, Cold War era kind of post-apocalyptic game. The game has always sort of featured survivors from World War III in the year 2000, when basically the nuclear exchanges had happened and the players are trying to live in the aftermath of that. At the time, obviously, it was about a future. Now it's 24 years and 25 years in the past. But the current version owes a lot to their Forbidden Lands game, where there's different cycles. There's some really engaging survival mechanics in the game. And I don't know, like, I've run it twice so far, and it's one of those games where one of the things about story games that I like or have enjoyed when I've run them is the idea of, playing to see what happens. Because you don't know in those games, it's the moves that the characters take. That's how your characters take action in the story. And it is those moves that change things in the fiction and that drive the story forward. In this, it's not those moves that do it. It is the events that happen, the decisions the players make, the outcome of their dice rolls that can have small cumulative effects to make for the overall moving parts that make up the adventure or the setting. And I don't know. I think that like the One Ring, it's not a game for everybody, obviously. It is at default, it is a game where there is no magic or monsters or whatever else in it. So you're just trying to survive, but there's enough interesting mechanics that are in there for the game mechanics to be really interesting. But there's also, great setting stuff as well. The publishers have put out 3 additional box sets so far for it. And each of those has expanded the rules and the setting and giving you new kind of ways to play. If they continue in the vein they have been going as well, there's still a wealth of first edition products from Twilight 2000 that they have not yet kind of revisited. So there's lots of opportunities for additional stuff to come in. But even setting that aside, if you decide you don't want to do the homework and read, those books, you can use the core book just to start playing. Like, it's one of the few sandbox games where you truly, once you have read the basics of the rules, can pick a spot in a map, plunk the party down there, and just see what happens as you go. And I just love that kind of gameplay. And on top of that, the what is it? The Free League Workshop, which is like their drive-through RPG kind of creator, or community created stuff. There's a wide variety of things there to make the weird, the war weird, if you'd like to do that. There's 2 adventures that are add a specific kind of like Nordic horror quality to it. There's a Twilight Tangent sourcebook that has like zombies and vampires and stuff like that in it. And for our session, for our mashup, we had used Kenneth Haidt and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan's Dracula Dossier, one of my all-time favorite products, as a way of adding some context to it. And boy, like taking all that great stuff of an engaging game with lots of interesting things to do, with fun, things coming into play, just by playing the game and seeing what happens, and then adding in an overarching kind of conspiracy horror thing to it. Boy, oh boy. That was a really fun session to write and to run for me. So that one likewise was a massive standout. The final one is going to be, I'm surprised by this one, and I don't know why. I mean, I think that I should have listened to my friends who told me that I would really enjoy this game and I should get it to the table. That is Mythras, classic fantasy in particular. So Mythras is the game published by the Design Mechanism. It is basically a renamed RuneQuest 6th edition, from what I understand. I don't own RuneQuest 6th edition, so I cannot speak to that. But it is also a outgrowth of their, oh my goodness, Legends and something or other game. There was a first effort, kind of like a quasi Mythras that they released that is now defunct. That game line, Legends and something or other, was owned by Mongoose Publishing, who published the 2nd edition Traveler stuff. They just announced that they're not publishing anything further for that game. So there were 2 very similar games. Like Mythras is like 95% of what that game was. Now Mythras is the only kind of game in town for this style of RuneQuest 6th edition play. If you're not familiar with Mythras, it's if you know a basic role-playing game like what is it, Magic World or Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest or Delta Green, you know what this game is. You know you're getting a percentile dice rolls, but there's also a 2d6 or 3d6 statistics, similar to D&D. What Classic Fantasy does is it adds on a D&D style veneer to the game, making the game a little more of a class-focused thing, and then offering spells and monsters and stuff like that you would expect in a Classic Fantasy. And by Classic Fantasy, I mean like pre-3rd edition, to be honest, pre-2nd edition kind of D&D, AD&D. They recently, within the last month, also released the Unearthed Companion, which is the expansion of rules, some refinement of some stuff. And Classic Fantasy was quite good already. This makes it even better. Like, they add in a ton of spells. They make some changes to all the classes that I think are all for the better. They make a couple tweaks to the rules. It's just an exceptional game. I've only run it twice so far, but it's one of those things where a lot of things clicked as I was running it, where I was thinking that, oh, this is really, I like this about other games, and I see that here. I think it would make for a really, really, really good ongoing game. It was pretty fun for the short games that we played as well. Not to say that those short sessions weren't fun, but both of those were set in a mega dungeon called Stone Hell that we had not really run on the channel before. And I think a Stone Hell campaign using Classic Fantasy would be absolutely fucking awesome. It's a really, really cool game. The things that I like about it, maybe I'll try and articulate something beyond just saying it's super cool. I think that the way that this differs from some of the other games that are D100 based, there's some great texture to the combat in the game. So similar to Elder Scrolls, which also uses a D100 based resolution, there's different, you have different actions during your turn, but then you have different special effects depending on the outcome of your dice roll that you can trigger. Those are just kind of like, if you know what the age system, like, Dragon Age or Fantasy Age or Modern Age, the stunt mechanic in those games, or the Expanse RPG, those outcomes are what you would pick with your special effects in Mythras, and they've produced some those, I should say, vary by the type of weapon you're fighting with and whatnot. And I don't know, like it gives some really interesting, and it feels immersive and very simulationist mechanics or outcomes in the actual gameplay, which can be lethal and whatnot. But I love that kind of feel for old school games where the game mechanics reflect the lethality of the circumstances. GURPS does this exceptionally well, and in a way that is a little more nuanced and a little more, intuitive, or feels more real than like just a small amount of hit points would do in low level play in a class-based RPG, or a regular, D20 based, class-based RPG. Which is not to say those aren't great as well. Just I love the feeling of that when game mechanics can make it intuitive. So like getting stabbed with a dagger in the game feels as bad as it does as it presumably would in real life. I fortunately have thus far not been stabbed by daggers. But that's one of the things I think this does well. It fits sits on a really great balance between that kind of simulationist stuff without getting too buried in detail or in nuance. The game, likewise, is also exceptionally well designed in the sense that there's a lot of considerations for how things interact in it, which you might not, for a game that isn't as overt in its adding game mechanics to all aspects of play the way that like Lex Arcana or One Ring are. You might think that you might mistake that this game just is like any other RPG where they haven't thought through all the different aspects and things that don't come up often, like exhaustion or travel fatigue or drown. I don't know, all those little nuances where when you look it up in this game, because it is the inheritor of 5 previous editions worth of lessons, it really is like, oh yeah, you've got that in here, that makes sense for why that's the way it is. And it was the final of my 6 games. It really stood out as one of the best ones I've run this year. And we're going to talk about next year's games a little later. So let me get that one off the screen. But yeah, Mythras, I'm glad that I finally followed the recommendations of my friends and actually ran it. So those are games that were individual. We only got to the table once or twice, or in Elder Scrolls' case, a couple of times. Actually, in One Ring, a couple of times as well. But all of those, I thought, were real standouts of the 45 that we ran on the channel, as having something really unique or really compelling about the games. Let's next talk about the ongoing games. So these are just strictly not the campaigns themselves. I love running all of the games that I run on the channel. I love the campaigns in all of them. These are where I think just the game mechanics for them are extremely well suited for an ongoing campaign. So let's start with one that we're currently running twice on the channel. The game's so nice, we're running it twice. That is... Come here, you. My goodness, I thought I had some order to my stacks here. I was mistaken in that. So, first is Traveler, 2nd edition, published by Mongoose Publishing. Traveler is, we have been running it for a couple of years now as one of our Sunday games. And we are currently playing a short adventure with our Wednesday group, our Night Below group, playing that. And Traveler is it's just such a good game. Like some of the other games I've talked about, it has everything thought through exceptionally well. And one of the things I realized this year, I had in past talked about how, the thing that's the greatest about Traveler is the character creation. And it is really good, and it's really fun. And unlike many other games. There are other games that have a life path system, but Traveler is quite unique in that especially if you're doing it as a group all together, it's so much fun. But I've also come to realize that it's the gameplay as well. The way that the game is set up, the incentives and the challenges that are baked into the setting, and in the in just the practicalities of keeping a ship going, how far things can travel, and so forth. It's an exceptionally good game on that sense too. The 2d6 task resolution with the boon bane mechanic added in, which is, if you're not familiar with it, if you're familiar with 5th edition's advantage, disadvantage, you know what it is. Add 1 extra dice in, take the best two for a boon, keep the best worst 2 for a bane. There's a degree of success, which I think is called margin of success in that game, and that has an impact on task resolution. There's exceptional source books for everything. In particular, this year they released the Starship Operations Manual. I'm butchering the name of it, but you'll be able to find the one I'm mentioning, which just is an entire book about what space travel is like, what the ship is like, what the experience is with anti-gravity, what can go wrong, how the plumbing is set up. And that shit may not sound tedious, but because so much time is spent on the ships, having that information is just really, really useful for making the world feel more like an actual place your players' characters occupy, which is important in Traveller because you're effectively just playing folks. It's something I've mentioned on the channel before, but one of the things I love about Traveller is that you just play folks. Like, you're not playing superheroes or, powerful fantasy warriors or wizards or whatever. Not that I don't love those too, but in Traveller, there's something special about just playing people who are just trying to do things. You're not necessarily dealing with Lovecraftian evils or whatever else. It's just folks trying to get by with whatever thing they want to do, whatever thing that interests them. And adventure happens all around that, but it's just it makes for one of my favorite sci-fi settings, full stop, and my favorite science fiction RPG setting, full stop. I've run a couple of licensed games over the past year as well, like a couple of Star Wars games, some Star Trek, Alien. The thing that is just so great about Traveller as well for an ongoing game is it's its own thing. And it's got, because it's so old, you can, if you want to, pick up a ton of books for it for any of the editions, and you can pretty much use any of them with it, with the exception of kind of new era stuff as far as setting information goes. But if you don't want to pick up any of that, there's a wiki that has all of the information on it. So you don't need to pick up anything. You have a core book, and you can go to space with your friends with just that. And in particular, if you adopt the default assumption of a traveling, the part owners in a ship who are just trying to keep it in the air, whether that's by taking on odd jobs or doing trade or whatever, it's just it makes for such an engaging and fun ongoing game where so much of the play is about the characters and about what they're doing. There is other more nitty gritty stuff like building up your ship or engaging in speculative trade, or, there in the Traveller Companion, there are rules for building up adversaries and allies and, factions and stuff like that. So if you want to have more of that in the game, you can. But if all you want to do is just role play in space with friends, it's a great, really, really great game for an ongoing campaign. Next up, it was my favorite that I identified for the year as of October, and that is Imperium Maledictum, which is finally seeing some extra products come out. In PDF right now, we have the Player's Guide and the GM's Guide to the Inquisition play. This game is the latest for Warhammer 40k RPG published by Cubicle 7. Cubicle 7's record continues to be exceptional as far as producing outstanding games. And Imperium Maledictum, in this game, which is one of 2 40k games that is actively being published by them. You can get PDFs of older games from them, but these are the ones that are actually in, they have a line that is being developed. This one is the investigative kind of, intrigue one, whereas Wrath and Glory is the action-oriented one. Which it's not to say you can't use this for action, This game benefits from lessons learned with the mechanics in Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition, which are quite complicated. Streamlines a lot of things, changes a couple of things, and it makes for just one of my favorite games to run and to see played at the table. The game thus far has been limited only really by the fact that there was only the core book out. The source books that are coming out are terrific because they are focused on specific areas of what kind of 40K game you might want to play. But I am really looking forward to seeing more material come out for this. For an ongoing game, there seems like there is a pretty long runway as far as XP is concerned for it as well. It's just, it has really great game mechanics, or expansive at least game mechanics, for interesting tactical combat. You can abstract it if you like and not use a battle map, or you can set down a map and have the characters going hex by hex as they're plowing their way along. Psychers feel like they have a really great decision to make about risk reward when using abilities. And the way that the psychics work in this is different from any other Warhammer 40K product they published so far, or anyone has published so far, with the exception of the actual tabletop game. My understanding is the threshold that's used in this is accurate to the current version of the tabletop game, and it's awesome. It's awesome because it makes my job as a GM so much fucking easier, because it's a lot easier to maintain an NPC psyker accurately by the rules without having to fudge shit. So I really like that. The options for characters, even just in the core book, are really, really cool as far as the decisions they get to make. The way you make your character is through a combination of different selections of like where you're from, who your patron is, where you served before you came to whoever your current patron is, and then what broad archetype you follow. And then this has already been expanded with more options as of the player's book that came out for Imperium Maledictum's Inquisition source book. So I imagine there's just going to be more and more that come out as we go. But yeah, I think that the amount of different types of games you can run, even with just this is another one of those settings too, where there's not a huge amount of setting material in the core game itself, but there is so much cultural, detritus that you can pick up about 40K, whether it's reading on wikis or watching lore videos or playing video games or playing the tabletop games or whatnot, that it's not the kind of thing where you would need to have a enormous explanation of what the world is. There's an overview in it, so if you're totally unfamiliar with it, you can learn that way. But it's I think that the option and the structure, I should say, of acting for a patron is a really clever way of giving clear focus and structure to the campaign. That's something that Pinnacle Entertainment does with their Savage Worlds products really, really well, where they just, they make it razor focused about what the game is about and what you're supposed to do in it. Speaking of Cubicle 7 and Warhammer, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, absolutely fantastic game. It is very complicated. It has a lot of moving parts. It's one of my favorite games to run. It takes a while to master a system, and typically if a system requires me to put a lot of work in to make sure I'm remembering all the different little aspects of it, I'm not sure it's going to be the game for me. I've already acquired my baseline knowledge of like Rollmaster back in the day and whatnot, so I've got that sitting in the back of my skull, resin from previous things. So there's not a lot of games where I would go out of the way to try and learn everything that I could about it, but this game is so worth it. But we've had great investigative sessions, combat sessions. You would not think that combat would be as fun and engaging as or you might not in a D20 game or D100 game that is intended to be grim and perilous and make combat really threatening. The criticism I've heard old school players talk about they like, oh, it's a hero hammer because they're too powerful. I ran an adventure using Warhammer Fantasy 2nd Edition, and the players felt like idiots for most of the, not the players, the characters. Players were all lovely. The characters felt like idiots because they were not competent at anything up until, up until we ended the campaign, and then fucking all of them except for one died because they were incompetent at combat. And it's not like, that's fair enough. If that's the game you want to run, fill your boots. There's tons of great stuff that's out for 2nd Edition, but it felt that the only reason it was dark and grim and whatnot for that 2nd Edition version was because the game just was, the math was weighted against the players. And like, if you just got a minuscule chance of success and you're going to get hit really hard, and then there's a death spiral that will occur afterwards, that's perfectly fine. That's a fine way to manifest the grim and perilous feel of a setting. This, I think, has more nuance to it. And yes, characters can feel very powerful. Like our dwarf tunnel fighter is exceptionally deadly in combat, especially with Skaven. But he's currently a walking wounded right now in an extended fight because he threw his back out. There's also his armor is being degraded because he got puked on by a, house-sized rat. And those are the kind of things. And then there's other little things that can happen, like, just a bad critical result. There are ways of mitigating against that with narrative metacurrency, but those are limited as well, and quite limited in that game. So the peril, or the feeling of peril, it seems, is still there. It's just that you're not seeing characters drop as often because the math is weighted against them. I also, just so that as an aside, absolutely adore that combat is always a contested role. So when you exchange blows, even if you are dog shit at your skill, if you're fighting someone equally unskilled, there's still going to be an outcome from that exchange. Somebody is going to hit somebody else. And there may also be criticals involved, but that means that combat moves along at a much faster clip because there is no wasted time. There is no round where someone does something and there is no outcome to it. There's always going to be an outcome, whether that is that someone blocked or whatever. So, yeah, and there's, I shouldn't say there is always the potential for an outcome, because if someone gets a critical on their defense, then that inflicts a critical hit on the attacker. So combat is never without risk in this. There's also a huge amount of variety in characters you can build. They have done an exceptional job of making small adjustments to the game over time, so it plays more as the designers, I think, intended now. And there's also one of the very best mega adventures is published for this game. So plenty of reasons why this makes for just an exceptional ongoing game. Also, that complexity, there is a reward to it. When you get to know the rules and you get to know it, it moves along much faster. So even if you don't remember as the GM, your players will be like, oh no, doesn't it work this way? And so as long as somebody remembers, this is how Shadowrun operates, right? Like Shadowrun traditionally is, good GMs in that will always rely on the players to help out with rules because there's so much to know in that particular game. This is similar in that way. And honestly, if you get stuff wrong or you forget stuff, it's not going to matter because you're forgetting it for everybody, right? For the good guys and the bad guys, none of them are getting the benefit or penalty from that. So it all works out, even if you don't remember all of it. Next up is a similar grim and perilous game. This was only a war story. We ran I can't remember, 20 part. I don't remember how long it was. Somewhere in the teens, maybe 20 sessions. Ryan Vernier's Blackbirds RPG. This is just, I've run 2 mini campaigns with it now. One of the most fun games to run. I think the gameplay itself is very good. It is based on the Zweihander game mechanic, but it makes substantial changes to it. So the game is unique in a lot of ways. And The setup for the heroes for who the players are going to be playing in the game is a great way of having your cake and eating it too. It's a grim, dark setting, but the players are exceptional because of a quirk of circumstance. They have a fragment of fate in them, so they are going to be standouts above the kind of common rabble, but they are definitely, mortal, and they can't be hurt, they can't be killed. They also have a resource they can expend that has a fun kind of, when you spend it, you flip a coin to see if you get it back the next session mechanic. There's interesting decisions the players get, and unlike any of the other Zweihander games, there is a kind of quasi-video game-esque like finishing move that every character gets with their special abilities. And characters can choose which ones to slot and which ones to not have. It makes for a game where if you're awarding XP regularly as you go, characters can advance and have, interesting decisions to make, gain access to interesting new abilities. It's a really great setting where you get to have the darkness, but also you can play with some hope. You could choose to dial up, dial down that, to your preference, but it really walks an incredible line between that capturing the kind of source material. Berserk, the manga, and the anime are clearly huge influences on this game. But the players seem to really enjoy this the few times we've run it, and I love running this game. It's a great, great game. This is one of those ones where I say ongoing. I've had issues with earlier versions of Zweihander. There is currently, at the time of recording, a new version that's coming out that has made some changes, so I don't want to speak about that one. But older versions of Zweihander, I felt, had a lot shorter runway for character advancement because you went up pretty quickly within your tiers, and then over the course of 3 tiers, you were done. This has 3 tiers, but it takes a lot longer for characters to get through them. And there is a clear kind of transition from one tier to another in the context of the story as well, because you do something with the players where you sort of reorient for each chapter of your campaign. And it's clear that, Ryan Vernier worked in video games and in movies and TV before. You can see how he's taken the 3-tier structure and kind of adopted it as a 3-act structure for an overall campaign as well. So it's a game that really suits it quite well for ongoing games. Next up is one I have not run as much as I have in previous years, but I've recently had a bit of an epiphany about it. And also we have one of our longest running games on the channel uses that. Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is the remastered version. So PF2 was a game that I really, really fell hard for, and for a lot of years was my go-to game. If I wanted to try and run a one-shot of something or whatever, if I had an idea for something that was even half-assed fantasy, sometimes even science fiction, I would use PF2 because it was a robust rule set. I could design precisely the thing that I wanted for it. Last year, not to 2024, 2023, we started playing the Kingmaker 2nd Edition campaign on Fridays. And there's issues with the 2 things that came up early on in the game that kind of made it challenging. One of them was we didn't do a session 0 with everyone together. We did it on a Discord server, and the party wasn't balanced in the sense that we had any healers in the group. Like, to be frank, we didn't have any healers in the group, which meant that combat was exceptionally deadly. Also, I forgot lessons I had learned when I was running Pathfinder 2 using the Barrow Maze setting, that random encounters with that game don't fit very well because balance is such a core component of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, like it is in 4th Edition, that you need to be mindful of that, or it's just you will have mathematically unfair encounters. Characters will get, there's a feeling of peril with old school sandboxing play. If you might go somewhere and, oh God, this is more powerful than I am, and I need to get the hell out of here. You can't run, though, in Pathfinder 2. So sometimes you're going to run into encounters that are just mathematically unfair for you, and they're going to shit stomp you, and there's not really much you can do about it because that's just the way the math works in Pathfinder 2. That is its strength, though, in that you can design set piece encounters or structured encounters that are so well balanced that you don't have to worry about accidentally killing your players, even when they have really bad back-to-back-to-back dice rolls. You do need to have a balanced party for that still. So we sorted that out, though. But then we also had rotating players in it. So when you're prepping a session, you're not sure if you're having 6 players or you're having 2 players in a thing. It makes sandboxing a lot harder. But where the game excels, I think, is in running structured narratives. So our Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign, Spires of Paradar, for instance, that game works so well for that. When we have the combat fights, they are fun. There's a good balance to them. If it's supposed to be easy, it is easy. If it's supposed to be challenging, it is challenging. The players get to do and draw on a bunch of really neat abilities that only show up in combat, but the robust skill system and the subsystems that they've introduced all give lots of great rules for you to still be playing Pathfinder 2, even if you're not rolling initiative for weeks and weeks at a time. I recently ran a session of Pathfinder 2 for my childhood friends. We're in the 3rd year of a campaign where we're playing. We only get the chance to play together once every year. So we've started a 20-year campaign now where every Christmas the characters go up a level, and we're playing Pathfinder 2 using that with the same story, and we're advancing it. We're trying to sneak in extra sessions where we can as we go, but it gives us one thing to play, and then if the Pathfinder 2 gets replaced with something else, the 20 level system has been a thing in so many games for so long that if we switch games, it won't really make a difference. But we had a really, really great session with that lately as well, and it was more the way I would typically run stuff, where I have combat structured as a set piece encounter as opposed to just a necessary intrusion on that at random, the way that the sandboxing one did. So, which is a long way of saying the Kingmaker campaign, not because of the players, because of the way that there were some ways the game and the story was interacting with each other, it just really soured me on it. And I'm glad that I've had a chance to go back. We also started the year in 2024 playing a war story with Starfinder 1st Edition in our Spires of Paradar campaign. And that lasted, I think, 3 months or so before we got back to PF2. And being back playing PF2 again this year with Spires of Paradar has reminded me how good that game is. The remaster, I should say, the remaster also kind of took a little bit of steam out of my sails for it, because I really resented having to buy new books. If I follow the line the whole time along, I completely understood the reasons for them doing the remaster, which were because Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro were being fuckheads about the license, and making sounds about potentially yanking it. So I get where your core product suddenly is at peril. That's going to need you to re-release it. The remastered products are outstanding. They did such a great job of giving justified reasons for improving the rule books, their readability, their navigability. I'm over that bit of resentment now. And we've had 2 really interesting books come out. 3, actually, because there's a new Divine Mysteries that just came out. But the War of Immortals introduced some mythic scale play. War of Immortals? Yeah, War of Immortals. And then there's a Howl of the Wild, the Wilderness book, which gave us a bunch of neat stuff like large size PCs. So if you want to play a large Minotaur or a Centaur or an Awakened Animal, that supplement gave that. And I'm coming around once again to remembering why I used to just this was my desert island game. I'm not sure. I don't know. It might be again. I don't know if I have a desert island game necessarily right now, but if I was gun to head, bet you Pathfinder 2 would be the one that it would be. And the final one for ongoing games is one we've only been running for a few months now, and it is a variant of it. So in fairness, it is that. It is not the game as written. That's Pathfinder 1st Edition. So Pathfinder 1st Edition obviously is the iteration of the D&D 3.5 game. I don't know if this game needs introduction to anybody, who would be listening to this, but we have been playing a bi-weekly Friday night game using the P6 variant of it, and the P6 variant caps the class advancement at level 6, and then you gain other abilities and other, things as you through feats as you gain more experience and more advancement. And what it does is it means that the math in the game is a lot narrower, and obviously that game that variant isn't necessarily going to work for every table, and secondly for every setting. But we're making up a custom setting for this Grindel House Empire for our campaign, which is called Last of the Falling Leaves. I had D&D 3.5 on my to-do list for this year, and while we didn't get 3.5 to the table, Pathfinder 1 was the replacement. And what it's allowing us to do is to have the game be a lot more low fantasy than what typical Pathfinder play is. The math is a lot more manageable, and it organizes or reorients the relationship of players to certain monsters in a way that just plays through it has implications on the story and the setting. Your characters are never going to be mathematically on par with, say, adult dragons. So how do you deal with a world with them doing that? And you're never going to be on par with, some of the higher level spells that you would typically be able to access as soon as you trained up, or maybe you went to an NPC and hired. It's only gods and demons and devils and angels that can do that kind of shit. So what's the implication of that on the world? And because Pathfinder First Edition has not only a pretty rock solid set of rules as far as combat is concerned, which really does shine at that 6th level. You get to see a lot of the more interesting stuff, and characters get to make interesting decisions. Pathfinder 1 also has such a huge line of products that there's great sets of not only options for characters and magic items and shit like that, but also for interesting sub-mechanics like the intrigue rules from Ultimate Intrigue, or the Ultimate Wilderness rules for Hexploration. I love them, and they've been a lot of fun to implement so far. And I don't know, it's been a really good mix of a nice crunchy tactical game, the way that I loved D&D 3.5, without it getting into kind of a power bloat that I worry about at like 12th level play and higher up. So for my own sensibilities and my own comfort level, I really love that. But it also, I feel like the game has even though the power level is limited at level 6, because characters are constantly getting new feats and getting access to new things, it allows the characters to change over time and regularly the way they would in any other campaign, while expanding out instead of up, if that makes sense. And so I guess my comment on this is only with respect to the P6 version of it. There's plenty of evidence as why PF1 is a great ongoing game as well. But yeah, for me, that the P6 variant made for a really, really great option for an ongoing game. So those are the games. Let me grab a little sip of something to wet the whistle here. Hey, everybody in chat. Hope everyone is having a great first day of 2025, or if not, I hope tomorrow's going to be a better one. Let's talk next about so that's this year. What else do we need to talk about this year? War stories. So we ran a couple of things. A couple of different campaigns were either put on hiatus, or we had other things that were picked up. We did, as we have been doing for the past 3 years now, we put our Night Below campaign on hiatus in late April, early May, to celebrate May the 4th, the Star Wars holiday, by playing a short Star Wars adventure. And it was fine. The players were great, obviously, as always. I liked the Fantasy Flight games what I find with, I'm not sure I like running Star Wars settings all that much, because I don't know, because we've run a bunch of different things, but I routinely with those war stories reach a point where I'm looking forward to getting back to the regular campaign or getting back to something else. And I don't know if it's just that if it's like Star Wars fatigue in general, because it isn't the special thing that only had a couple of things before and it's just, you know, a zillion things now. Or if it's that I don't know, I feel constrained by the setting. I really couldn't tell you why, but it is, when we get to the tail end of each of our war stories with Star Wars, I always feel kind of like, God, like, oh, can we just fucking get back to the regular game, which is not how I feel with all war stories. So we have in the past few years used Modiphius. We used Saga Edition, the last one published by Wizards of the Coast. We've used Fantasy Flight. We've used a variant of the 2D20 system. We've used Savage Worlds. And like the games are all great for it. I just, I don't know if I care. I don't think I have as much of an investment in running games in the Star Wars universe as I do even about Star Wars, I guess. And I don't think I'd really actually, I hate to say it, but I don't know if I really give a shit about Star Wars that much anymore. There's a bunch of shows that have come out that I've not bothered to keep up with. So the connection I had and the special, you know, feel for Star Wars, what playing Star Wars used to feel like for me, it's not there anymore. You know, I don't feel that, I don't get the jazz of hearing the John Williams score and whatnot the way that I used to. It's not to say that I haven't enjoyed some of the Star Wars stuff that's come out. I love Andor. But a lot of the other stuff, didn't really care about it all that much. And there's just so much of it now that I think as far as licensed settings go, the extra oomph that I would get from running a Star Wars thing is just that's just not there anymore for me. So hopefully that's just a temporary thing, and maybe trying something different with a different game might do it. But it's always a popular thing with the players as well. And I can find a way, knowing that I sort of stall out on those adventures. I think a smart thing to do with that war story is to try and find a more natural conclusion to it. And again, it's nothing to do with the players whatsoever. The players are all great. They always want to engage with the rules. They always roleplay their characters really well. It's really terrific stuff to see. It's just the setting itself. It's whatever extra oomph I would get from there being lightsabers or whatever else. It's just not there anymore, I don't think, for me. That said, our Blackbirds war story, by contrast, was exceptional. I felt like everyone was engaged with it. We had quite a few absences throughout that second half of the year, just for a variety of reasons of people being out of town or work circumstances changing or whatever. But in spite of that, we were able to play that adventure every week, and I'm really pleased with the way that the arc sort of went with it, and a number of the players seem to really enjoy that, the game itself and the setting and whatnot. So that war story was successful. The Starfinder one was interesting to see, and it was a lot of. I had a better time with Starfinder than I did with that, but with a game like Paradar, the war story for Starfinder I felt was. There was nothing beyond just playing that game that fed back into the main campaign or the main group. So I would be reluctant to do something like that again with that campaign. The Star Wars ones for Night Below, the players are always all on board for it. So and remind me about it before May 4th comes around. So there's something beyond just the story. And for other war stories, like our Rogue Trader campaign, we've rotated between 3 different games in our Rogue Trader campaign through a series over the past year, using Rogue Trader, using Wrath and Glory, and using Imperium Maledictum. But every one of those stories fed back into one another. You know, the Wrath and Glory one was filling in time that happened in a different part of the galaxy or different part of the universe. And then that one led to our follow-up one, which also fed back into Rogue Trader, which then fed back into our current Imperium Maledictum thing. And that likewise had that connection to it. The Starfinder one was a lot of fun. It was a fun setting to play in, but it was because of the constraints of story in it. Because I think the players also, the scenario I had set up, I think the players were like, look, my character, I'm pretty sure, would not be okay with just doing the shit and leaving. Like, we want to save this world. And that would prompt a very different kind of campaign. It would be a lot of fun, I think. And Starfinder First Edition, I have come around on. I really, really enjoyed running that particular version of the game. To be honest, I have every time I've run it. But I think as a war story, as far as something that's supposed to be taking up a few sessions that would otherwise be devoted to playing the ongoing campaign, I don't think it was a success in that sense. So the war stories were a bit of a mixed bag. I think the Rogue Trader ones were the most effective for it as far as like being part of the ongoing campaign. And the Blackbirds one serviced the goal, which was to play something different for a period of time when we were seeing challenges having a full party. But the Star Wars one, I think I need to think harder about how to approach that this year if I'm going to do another we're going to do another Star Wars one. And I would be extremely reluctant to do something that wasn't directly connected to flashbacks or other ongoing stories in Spires of Paradar if I were to do another war story in that campaign. So that's one thing I was thinking of this year. We ran a fair bit of war stories, which I really enjoy running. But I think there's lessons to be learned from how they came out in the wash from this year for me. What else? For this year are charity sessions. So things, maybe we can talk about what happened this year, and a little later today I will talk about what we're doing next year. This past year, like I said, first half of the year, we did single sessions for people picking the game they want to see me run. And those were an enormous amount of fun. I got forced out of comfort zones in certain games to prep things or run things that I wouldn't have otherwise. And all of them were great. I really enjoyed all of them. There's one game that not the players selected it. There's one game that did not live up to expectations for me. And I don't like talking about negative stuff in the channel, so I'm not going to call it out by name. But with the exception of that, the players know which one I'm talking about. And I just want to, I don't want to ignore that, but all the other ones, and it wasn't a suggestion or anything like that. It was just the game itself. The game I don't feel was, it's not for me. Every other one though was exceptional. And then the second half of the year, the mashups, we did 6 mashup sessions where we took one classic adventure and mashed it up with a game that it was not designed to be played with. It's something I've done in the past that, I, in particular, taking Call of Cthulhu adventures and reworking them for other settings, like superhero settings or sci-fi settings or whatever. Those are very easy to do because you just take the structure of the mystery and then kind of fill in cognates for whatever things that the characters are supposed to uncover or visit or whatever. And then Ingolf, one of our players, ran this is his third year, I think, of doing the Dungeon 20 whatever, thing. And what it is he takes an issue of Dungeon Magazine and then uses every adventure in that with different role-playing games. And it's a great idea. And I did something that I thought that was what we would do for the second half. And each of them, I feel, was like, it could have been an ongoing game. The Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was mashed up with Acton Cthulhu 2D20. Let me think here. Rise of the Rune Lords was mashed up with Zweihander. Twilight 2000 was with the Dracula Dossier. The Lex Arcana was with Masks of Nyarlathotep. And was there only 4? Maybe there was only 4. What are the other ones I did? I should have looked at that beforehand. But in any event, let me see if I can remind myself with the other things that were down here. Fallout was mashed up with the Great Pendragon campaign. And I think maybe there only was 5, not 6. Maybe I just can't remember. That could quite possibly be 2. But in any event, those were a lot of fun, and it's something to to consider for next year. Not necessarily for the charity sessions, but for for drawing on other material. That mashup can be a really unique way of taking advantage of certain gaming products for game lines that you don't run. Like for me, I don't run Call of Cthulhu, or haven't regularly for a very long time now. But I can use those books and products for other stuff, even if it's a campaign material. So, yeah. Let's talk about next year. So that's sort of what we did this year. I think whether it's because of the year or the circumstances or the game we're running, this is one of our least successful years for charity initiatives. I'm enormously grateful to everybody who has donated for this year. So I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I'm not sure if it's because we're not having any direct benefits for donors anymore that are easy to understand, or if because I mention it at the end of every session we run, that it just becomes kind of background noise of my closing spiel or whatnot. But we didn't have as successful a year this year as we have in previous years. So we're going to try something different, completely different this year for how we're approaching the charity initiatives. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. First, let's start talking about the games for next year. So first up, we're going to talk about ones that the players picked. So as I mentioned, we have, I think it's 16 or 17 roster players. And what I asked is that everybody pick 4 games from favorite to, down to second favorite, third favorite, fourth favorite. We'll give them ranked choice voting, and we'll see how, and we'll keep a live tally of voting, and we'll see how where we go with which games are, what games you want to see us play next year. So I'm going to go in reverse order. We ended up with a list, boy, oh boy, of about 24-ish games or so. Like, it was a substantial list. So it might even be more than that, to come to think of it. But we have 6 clear leaders in it. The last couple, like rank number 5, number 6, are not quite the standouts from a couple of ones that are right below that, but they got enough votes so they're more. But the top, like 2 and 3, are clear standouts from all the others as far as players' interest is concerned. And a couple of them were quite surprising to me. So let's go through what those are. These are games we are going to get to the table in 2025, one way or the other. Whether it's by one shot or a periodic ongoing game, I do not know yet. We'll go from 6th place all the way up to 1st place, because why not? So in 6th place, we have, let's see here. I feel like I should be in a tuxedo and surrounded by, have one of those stick mics right now. All right, so in 6th place, we have Mothership. This is kind of an indie darling OSR sci-fi horror game. I am sure that other folks are much more familiar with this than what I have. I own it, but I've never run it. The only reason I have not run it is because of how much I really love the Alien RPG published by Free League, and this feels like it occupies much of the same space that it would. I also have a ton of other horror games that I would probably have as my go-to before I would go to this, so this is going to be a nice opportunity to get something off the shelf that I wouldn't otherwise run. It's a sci-fi horror game. It's very light. There is a box set that came out, kickstarted, oh gosh, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. But I also have the Dead Planet source book. Where are you? There you go. And A Pound of Flesh, an adventure, I think, for the thing. But yeah, Mothership. I know it's shocking that I might be interested in a sci-fi game and a horror game all at once, but I'm really looking forward to getting to know this game and getting it to the table this year. So that is one. Where am I going to put this? Put that right there. That is number 6. Number 5 is, this one surprised me, I will say. not because it's not a great game, but I did not realize how many folks were interested in playing it, and that is Flames of Freedom. This is another Powered by Zweihander game set during the time of the American Revolution. We ran a short campaign with this, and it was a shit ton of fun. I genuinely don't know why we stopped playing. I think it was player availability maybe was the reason for it, but awesome setting. There's a terrific kind of adventure out for it as well, but the source book, the core book itself, has just a ton of material in it. So you got pretty much anything you need, and it's a quasi-historical setting. It's historical in the sense that it is set in a specific point of our past, but it has magic and like conspiracy elements and whatnot. So it's not quite our past. It has a variation of the Powered by Zweihander rules as well that feels very swashbuckly and a lot of fun to play. I really enjoy this. Also, to be honest, as a Canadian, it's an era that I genuinely don't know an awful lot about. It's not something that we're taught in high school. So getting to know some of the historical elements when I was running it before was a lot of fun. So I am really looking forward to getting Flames of Freedom back to the table. It's a great game, a very unique setting. And likewise, like Lex Arcana has that kind of, it's built up enough that it... I don't know, there's a lot for running an investigative campaign. Players will have an instinctive idea of what they can do and what they can access. They know there's, probably newspaper archives, there's law courts and so forth. So really looking forward to that one. Next up at place number 4 is a game actually I was hoping to play last year, but just things conspired against us. Fading Suns. So Fading Suns is... sci-fi. I want to say, is it? Oh gosh, Bill Slavicsek, I think, is the main designer behind this. Let me take a look here. Bill Bridges. Okay. Fading Suns is a game that I was completely unfamiliar with. This is one of those ones that came out in the 90s when I was much more into like World of Darkness and some of the set of Deadlands and like Pinnacle books. So I never really got into the game at the time. And then its subsequent reprints I never got into either. But we have 2 players on the channel who are in particular, Graham and Will, who are really into Fading Suns. And Will has talked up Fading Suns for a number of years. And then Graham was talking about running Fading Suns. And I had a gift certificate for a store in my hometown that I needed to use, and I knew they had a copy of the core set that was written down, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to go pick this up and see what it is. The game, so the setting itself, I had taken as being just, poor man's Warhammer 40K, or poor man's Dune, and there's a grain of truth in that, but it is very much its own thing, and the game mechanics as well has this, I'm not sure if it's going to be fiddly at the table. I expect it will be, but I think that the game is going to be like Warhammer 4th edition. What's up, Anna? Oh, someone's snarling at somebody out there. Sorry. It feels like there's going to be a fair bit of moving parts, and it's going to ask a little bit of the players to understand the rules. But it looks really cool, and it looks very much like the kind of crunch that I would really get behind. I have gone pretty far down the rabbit hole with it since, and got a bunch of supplements for it. But because my expectation was I was playing, I didn't want to read a whole bunch of it. Now that I know I'm running it, I am really looking forward to, kind of getting my teeth into the setting. I love a good sci-fi setting, especially one that is designed as an RPG first, as opposed to a licensed product. And that's what this is. So this is taking Starfighter. That's part of one of the major appeals for me about that setting is that there's obvious, squint and you see it, a Federation or fucking Starship Troopers or Jedi or whatnot. But it is change enough that you're not just feeling like you're playing AirSats, Jedi, or whatever. this feels like it's done the same thing. It's transcended its influences in a way that like Dungeons and Dragons transcends its pulp and fantasy inspirations to become its own kind of genre. So I cannot say more about the actual setting because I'll probably get it wrong and I just don't know the stuff, but it's a game I'm really excited to get to know because it strikes me that it's the kind of game that I would really love. So that is Fading Suns at number 4. At number 3 is perhaps something, and this was one of the ones that was overwhelmingly voted for. Not a surprise, The One Ring. The One Ring, this is part of the reason I decided to give it a try for the holiday campaign that we recently ran. But it's a great game. I've already kind of showered this one with praises, so I don't need to say any more, I don't think, about it. But I am really looking forward to getting this one to the table. It's not a beer and pretzels game, and again, it's not for everybody, but it's one of those games. We were talking after our holiday campaign on New Year's Eve, well, yesterday, I guess, and like it's one of those games where I would really, if we ever did a weekend Musers marathon kind of thing, this is the kind of game I'd want to sit around a cabin and play all fucking weekend. It's such a fun. It's such a fun, emergent kind of play that requires very little prep on the GM side. It has interesting mechanics. I can see why so many of our players really wanted to either try this one out or get it to the table with some of the other roster players. Now, number 2, again, an overwhelming amount of players voted for this, or at least it ranked very highly. I do not yet have a physical copy of this because, well, I think it'll be evident momentarily why. That is the Mass Effect fan-made RPG that uses the D20 system as its core. So this game is like a 600-page game that has taken Star Wars Revised, the second version of the Star Wars RPG released for or by Wizards of the Coast, which is closest to D&D 3 or 3.5. And then used that as a starting point and created an entire game that incorporates some of the mechanics and the setting material and the sensibilities of the video games. I have not played Mass Effect beyond like maybe 2 hours. But I have started listening. I started listening to actual plays of the whole story, the no commentary things, so I can see what the story is for all those things. But we have at least 3 fanatical Mass Effect players among the roster, and I love me some sci-fi. I'm really looking forward to getting this one to the table. I didn't stick with the Mass Effect games, but that's because I typically, with video games, that's not what I look for those. I want something short and punchy and get in, get out, right? I am very, very limited attention span and time for those kind of things. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know the setting more. And I think that the Star Wars Revised was the version I ran the most until Saga Edition came out. So mechanically, I'm ready to dive in for this thing and see what we've got. So, and we have 3 players, like I said, who are just fanatics about this setting. So it's going to be so cool to be able to give that to them. It's also going to be interesting to see how... That's not true. I was going to say it'll be interesting to see how a video game setting adapts to an RPG, but I've had a shit ton of fun with Warhammer, World of Warcraft RPGs, the 5th edition one that we ran a couple of years ago, and I just talked about Elder Scrolls earlier, so I think it's going to be awesome. So I'm very much looking forward to this. And the top game, by a huge margin, actually, is Dragonbane. Now, Dragonbane is a game I've only played once. If you're not... I'm going to assume most people are familiar with it because it seems to be having a moment this year. Dragonbane is based on, was it Drak and Draugr? I forgive my butchering of Swedish. It's based on an old Swedish RPG that itself was based on the basic role-playing. So, to be honest, we're back to Mithras kind of once again, too. Only what Dragonbane does is it borrows some design ideas from D&D 5th edition and from some other games. It condenses levels and skills down to a D20 based thing instead of a D100. and it leans exceptionally heavy into a very particular art style, which either you will love, like I do. I adore this art. The cover artist and many of the art, much of the art from the inside is the same artists who do the art for Vaesen, another game published by Free Lagun, and I adore the art in that one. It is a game, I played it, and it was Graham who ran it for me, and the adventure was great, the other players were great and whatnot. The mechanics, I didn't feel like there was enough there to kind of for me to get purchase on. I do love me these crunchy games, so I recognize that it's just a matter of maybe it wasn't my flavor. But the more I've got into it and the more I've talked to Graham about it, the more I understand that the game suffers a little bit from first level itis, where the character you see at first level is not necessarily reflective of what the gameplay experience is going to be like. In a previous overview, I talked about my mistaking the G.I. Joe game for that. We played at first level. I really didn't care for it all that much. And then I made up some 5th level or 6th level pre-gens. I was like, oh, the game there's so much more to it. Same thing with this. So I've taken a dive back into this again. And I also found, with Graham's help, a really great kind of setting-based quasi-sandbox investigative adventure that has a very gothic horror vibe to it. So it fits what I want to like play the game as intended, as a kind of like a classic adventuring kind of thing, but in a bit of a lens that I favor for it. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it does seem like a lot of our players are looking forward to this as well. There's a lot of hoopla about this game right now, and everybody seems to be enjoying it. So I am going to get my head around it. Then it sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise. I shouldn't say that. I now see what higher level play or more experienced play is going to be like, and there are some similar carryover mechanics that you see in other Free League games, because this is published by Free League too, like Forbidden Lands and like One Ring, that are in here that I didn't get to see in the one session I played. So there's more to the game than what I understood. So I am really looking forward to diving into that. So that's the player games. Those are 6 player games from the number 6 all the way up to number 1. All of those we're getting to the table this year, and I am very excited for all of them. Next, I'm going to quickly talk about 6 games. There might be a couple more that just games that I am excited about. But first, let's talk about last year. So my last year's sort of to-do list included a bunch of games we got to the table. D&D 3.5 I said, but I did get it to the table this year as far as Pathfinder 1 is concerned. So maybe I'm giving myself credit there. Probably I'm not, because I've been promising an overview of 3.5 for a while now, and couple years now, and I still haven't done that, so maybe I don't get to tick that one off. I also don't get to tick off Werewolf 5th edition, Mage the Ascension 20th Anniversary Edition, or G.I. Joe, because all of those were on my to-run lists for last year. But the year got away from me. I did, however, get Mongoose Conan to the table. I got Ars Magica to the table. A white whale of mine, I finally got that to the table. Star Wars Fantasy Flight, I also got that to the table a couple of times, and D&D 4th edition. So a bit of a mixed bag. Got some things to the table that I intended, did not get some other ones, but in addition, so I thought what I'd do this year is, and what I wanted to do this year is to try and distinguish between games that I feel like belong on the list and games that I genuinely want to run. Because there's a couple things from last year, if I'm being honest with myself, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do with them. I just kind of felt like, boy, I really want to run these things. So I try to restrict what I'm including on my own to-do stuff, apart from the players list, by ones I actually want to run, or want to run, not just want to run, if that makes sense. All right, so first up is, boom, Savage Rifts. Savage Rifts is the Savage Worlds version of the classic kitchen sink setting published by Palladium Games, and it's awesome. We've run it a handful of times. It is a post-apocalypse, and it has some, in addition to the Savage Worlds kind of, wahoo, exploding dice stuff and all the great subsystems that Savage Worlds has, it also has a terrific exploration mechanic in it. It's a setting that I've loved since I was a kid. I mean, what kid wouldn't love a thing where you can play a mecha fighting a robot, fighting a dragon with a, talking dog as your, companion. Savage Worlds does an outstanding job of making it, I think, a little more reliable as a mechanic than what the Palladium system did. And they have continued to pump out just great stuff for it, including a major adventure that was set, I believe, in Missouri. And then there's new products coming out next year that expand into Europe and the UK. So, and we've run a handful of games with it, and so they were some of the most memorable experiences I've had with Savage Worlds. Hilariously, like, one character trying to drive when they have no drive skill. But it's a very, very, it's a game that I want to spend more time with as well, that I would love to see, not only because Savage Worlds is a really great system. I keep saying the word great or good, and that's not really helpful. I think there are interesting decisions you get to make early on when you're advancing your characters regularly that allow you to advance your character and shape them mechanically to be what you want. And I'd love to see that play out alongside the kind of moving around and dealing with monsters and random encounters and how the journeys mechanics work, all kind of adding into that emergent play. I think it'd be a great, great game to run this year. While this is not one I want to run, I suffered over whether to include this one on the list. But once again, we're putting Mage the Ascension 20th Anniversary Edition back on the list, in part because when I asked some of the players earlier this year, before my holiday in July, what games they would want to maybe check out, this one was on there as well. And I don't think this is one that I want to run. This is one I genuinely want to get to the table, and not in the ticking it off the list the way that Ars Magica maybe was. I did enjoy our Ars Magica session, and I'm looking forward to concluding that adventure. But I'm not sure I have a burning desire to continue running Ars Magica at the expense of other games. But Mage the Ascension still feels to me like now, at the stage of life I'm at right now, and where I am with having friends who play in the roster, I think this could make for a unmatched kind of adventure or campaign. That really lives up to sort of the ideas I've had of what this game could be for such a long time. So that's really overselling it once again. So I'll look forward to talking about it in my 2025 year in review. But I think this is the year we get an actual adventure played with Mage 20th Anniversary Edition. But we'll see. I've been wrong before. Next is for new games. So this is one that has been on the table for about 7 months now. It's Scion 2nd Edition. So I've never run 1st Edition. I think I might have played in a session of 1st Edition before, but I've never run 1st Edition. I have not run this at all. Scion 2nd Edition is a revision of the original game that sees you playing characters who are heirs to to godhood, basically, in a modern context. It's a Wainscot fantasy game of mythology. The 2nd edition makes a couple changes. One is to some of the setting elements. The setting instead is this kind of nebulous, mythic world. It's assumed that everyone knows there are gods, I guess, and there are all gods, but there's conspicuously not monotheistic gods. I feel like there were some decisions that were made to try and make this more culturally sensitive in particular to Christianity and other monotheistic faiths, which in the 1st edition were really characterized as the bad guys. Clearly the entire religions were dupes for the major villains of the setting. And I guess they have recast it so it's a more nebulous thing now. The story path system I've only run once before, and I had challenges with it, but I think it's because of the iteration of it that was in the that came from Beyond the Grave RPG. It's got a couple of other tricks to it that for a first-time GM running it, or storyteller, I guess, running it, it didn't click with me. But I've read these over multiple times now, and I think it works for this. They've also got, like, I've got the hero one for when they become demigods, and this little beauty, Masks of the Mythos, which adds in a bunch of mythos stuff to it. My idea for this has been that to use Masks of the Mythos to run a kind of like quasi-Hellboy-esque thing, where the players are somehow connected to the Lovecraftian myths in a more pulpy, kind of comic booky type way. And but the struggle I had with the game is because I just had a hard time. I can understand the decision, the reasons for why they made the changes to the setting, because, like, fair enough, you know, Christians represent a pretty big demographic in North America and in the English-speaking world. So, you know, casting their faith as the bad guys, I get why that might put some people off. But the version of the world they've got in this just feels so fucking foreign and silly to me that I just didn't, I couldn't figure out how best to approach it. But they released a supplement this year, kickstarted it, which offered a bunch of different alternate kind of settings for it. And again, this is obvious now in retrospect, but, like, you don't need to use the setting, right? Like, you can make it whatever the hell you want, however pronounced or hidden or whatever you want the gods to be. And one of the settings they offer is a pulp setting, where like you're playing at there's different scales of play. There's demigod, there's hero, there's god, there's origin, like the sort of baseline human type stuff. And you can play in a pulp kind of setting, like a 30s style, 20s, 30s style pulp fiction-esque setting, where you're playing these hero level demigods. And I think, like, in a kind of like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, advanced 30, 40 years type thing. And I think that would be really, really, really cool. I love an excuse to run a pulp adventure. And I think that's a fun context, having a wainscot fantasy approach. And whether, you know, I choose to cast the, you know, monotheistic faiths as villains and as a villainous plot, I don't think I need to deal with that if I'm just running a couple of one-shots or whatnot. So if there are players who are uncomfortable with that sort of assumption, I don't need to deal with that. They can X-card that right out of there, and I don't need to deal with it. So Scion 2nd Edition is one I really want to get to the table this year as well. I've already talked about it at length, but it might not be a surprise that I want to get classic fantasy back to the table more. This is, I had enough fun with our 2 sessions of it that we played, and I saw that what I think is the potential in it. Sorry, I'm yanking this cord because I'm moving my hands around so much. That I really want to see more of this at the table. It was awesome. I think there's an enormous amount of potential for running that kind of thing. Not even just in a like a dungeon fantasy or a mega dungeon style setting, but like gothic horror type thing or traditional fantasy or whatever. Like the rules seem really, really good and well suited to the style of more grounded heroic fantasy that I like to run. So that one is definitely on the list. And finally, my old friend Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm telling you, Anna is also a big fan. Like I said, I've really had a renewed appreciation for this game, and I'd like to do some of the stuff I used to do with it is try and take, you know, weirder concepts or odder concepts and do stuff with them with Pathfinder 2. You know, the Galarian setting is incredible. The source books are incredible for it. I don't want to fucking do homework reading about someone else's setting, though. So I'm a bad GM to run in a default setting like Forgotten Realms or whatnot, because I just don't want to bother. I want to make up whatever I want and steal whatever I need from these settings. I don't necessarily want to have to get things correct, right? But I would love to use some of the material from the new source books in particular and try and run some more condensed, short, you know, little PF2 sessions and really get back to banging around some of the newer. There's a whole bunch of classes I have not seen at the table yet that have come out since the last one, and I do happen to have a really exceptional conversion of Dark Sun to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And while a survival-oriented sandbox, I think there are other systems that would do that with Dark Sun better, a story-focused version of it is a very intriguing concept. I do have rules for using PF1, 3.5, 5th edition, 4th edition, 2nd edition, Castles and Crusades for playing Dark Sun. So like I got a lot of other options that are out there. But a PF2 version, I think, might be a really, it's a very intriguing possibility of many possibilities. The one thing with using old school D&D settings, though, with PF2 is it's just like when you use PF1, you leave behind a lot of the stuff that makes Pathfinder cool and unique from D&D. D&D doesn't have a gunslinger class at default. D&D doesn't have a shifter class at default. D&D doesn't have a hunter class at default, or a, you know, so there's a lot of things that it has on offer that have implications on what the world is like and whatnot about Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, that I think is worth. I like the idea of returning to Dark Sun because I love Dark Sun, but I feel like then I'd be also narrowing and not using everything that is potentially on offer from PF2. So that's the other one I really want to get back. We're still going to continue with our ongoing campaigns, but I want to get my groove back, as it were, with PF2 by running it the way that I like to run it, not by, doing a sandbox, which I've learned now twice is not an optimal way to run it. So I'll look forward to my 2026 update where I'm lamenting that it didn't work again, because I seem to not learn lessons. That element is still hot, Madison. Last thing I'll talk about before I check for questions here is about a couple of just oddball stuff that has made its way off the shelf and to my nightstand a number of times, and I keep thinking, like, God, I gotta find time to run something with this stuff. So I thought I'd talk about those because, I don't know, I like talking about RPGs. Let me grab those. Trying to get some semblance of order here. All right. Some of these are actually games that I have run. Which one do I save for last? I know which one I save for last. So first up is one I did talk about in our October update, and that's Vampire Dark Ages. I love the idea of this one. I don't know if it's gonna match this might be a like I want to run it kind of scenario here. But I was reading this after my last update in October, and I went back to my Transylvania Chronicles things. Man, there's a lot of potential there. When I started putting some meat on the bones for a game, but what I don't want to do with that one is I would ideally not like to use pre-gens, or at the very least not pre-gens for an ongoing game, because I'd like players to make their own characters for that one. But Vampire Dark Ages, I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with that one. Not the least of which I get to do a whole bunch of Romanian accents then. And I have not yet seen Nosferatu, but I hear that Bill Skarsgård does just a absolutely over-the-top, Transylvanian or Romanian accent in that, and I can't wait to do my imitation of it. Another one is, this is something I've talked about before, but I don't know why. Battletech, the Battletech RPG, A Time of War. I love Battletech. I love the setting. I keep thinking every now and then about, like, I've described it before as being like Game of Thrones, but with giant robots. And, oh man, like, I think it's not something that a one-shot would suit. And there are other science fiction RPGs where you're just playing folk, like Traveler, where I think that it is a better, there are more options and there are more things to do and more spaces for different types of characters in it. But as far as like a, Battlestar Galactica-esque, kind of military focused game, I still think there's an enormous amount of potential in Battletech thing. And I think that I overthink what I would want to do with it. When we could have a really fun, short, adventure. with that game, if I just, put my mind to it, and we would get a chance to actually play some mecha combat, which I fucking love in Battletech. Next up, this continually makes its way back to the table, fucking Rollmaster. Rollmaster is every 2-3 months, it's back off the shelf, and I dick around with it for a few hours, and then I put it back on the shelf again. But boy, oh boy, there's something about Rollmaster that I love going back to that game. We did have, I think, a really fun little war story adventure playing Rollmaster a few years back. And I will say, and this isn't a comment or criticism of other game communities, but the fans of Rollmaster are some of the loveliest people that I've interacted with. As far as people who have watched some of our sessions on the channel, it has always been just really enthusiastic, really friendly, and really helpful. And I greatly appreciate that about because we're streaming our games, inevitably there will be people from different communities who end up seeing our games. And there are certain games that I am reluctant to run on the channel because I just don't want to deal with the fuckheads, and the communities of some of those games are just fuckheads. And the Rollmaster community, setting aside the fact that the game has a special place in my heart because it's one of the games we played a ton as a kid, and I really love it, and it occupies a bunch of my creative, space. The community of who play Rollmaster all seem like really lovely people, and that makes it doubly a pleasure to run the game when we do get a chance to get it to the table. So. Whether we're going to get Rollmaster back to the table this year, I don't know. But boy, I do sure love reading that game. Next is one that I did get to the table this year, GURPS 4th edition. I love GURPS. I absolutely love the gameplay of it. I love the settings in it. I would love to run a atomic horror adventure. This is another one of those ones that it's been around for so long. Now that I've actually got Ars Magica to the table, I think I can shuffle this one. This is now my current white whale. It is a GURPS Atomic Horror Adventure. And if you're not familiar with the Atomic Horror, is a supplement that saw 2 editions with GURPS. So I think it was popular because they wouldn't have reprinted it. But it was basically 50s and 60s sci-fi, the RPG. And it has so many fun things. Unfortunately, in our contemporary environment, a lot of stuff that is in that book that is kind of fun and kooky is also part of QAnon. So it's like, it is unfortunate, at least the more extreme stuff in QAnon. So like, there is a bit of a like, oh, you've ruined my fun, because people will believe this stuff now. But the setting itself is... It looks like it would just be an absolute hoot to play, and I would love to run it straight, like not play it as a parody, but run it as a as if it was the original thing or the original Day the Air Stood Still, that kind of like 50 sci-fi Red Scare element to it. I think would be a lot of fun. The last thing I'll say, last game, not the last thing I'll say, but last game. Deadlands. Deadlands, I have not got to the table in about 3 years, I think, 2 or 3 years now. And Deadlands is Weird West by Savage Worlds. I cannot think of a better pairing. There's lots of other games that are great, Old West games, but setting aside the fun of the setting of having monsters and shit in here, the campaign structure of like exposing and defeating the enemies of mankind, that's a fun structure for a campaign, I think. And the Savage Worlds rules are so good at emulating pulp action, like more so than anything else that they achieve. They do a lot of other great stuff. They make the feel of action movies and of action, pulp serials. It really captures that at the table in the gameplay, particularly if you start using some of the optional rules like Conviction. I think that a Weird West game is the kind of thing I would just adore running, especially if we got more into the like more than just like cowboys fighting monsters and got into the kind of like you know, investigative reporters and weird scientists and, you know, faith, you know, men of faith and women of faith and folk of faith who were going out and facing these evil things, I think would make for just an enormously fun campaign, or even a couple of sessions, I guess. But Deadlands is awesome. It also, Savage Worlds has such a great set of rules for chases and for, you know, networking. The game has gone from strength to strength to strength over editions, and the most recent version, their like 20th anniversary or 10th anniversary edition, is so good. Either further refinements, and there's a horror book out for it now too that I forgot. Yeah, Savage Worlds has a couple of slots on this discussion today, so definitely a favorite here. So that brings us to the end of what I had planned to talk. We're only 2 hours in, which is pretty quick for me. Let me check chat and see if there's any questions that I have here. Hi, everybody. My goodness. I hope everyone is having... Thank you so much for joining me today, folks. Let's see here. Oh, 6 hour. Yeah, THX. A 6 hour stream to give them all justice. That's why I had to keep it down to 6 that were standouts, 6 ongoing games, 6 player picks, and 6 of mine for next year, which I broke as well. All right, let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, it's so good. You know, I see, Ellistil, you got... the Elder Scrolls got you playing the game again, the video game. That's fucking awesome. It's funny because the reason we ended up running Moria, I can't remember if I mentioned this on stream or if I mentioned afterwards, but it was playing the Return to Moria video game that prompted me to get back into thinking about running One Ring, and in particular to pick up the Moria sourcebook, which I ended up loving. But I love when stuff like that, you know, there's great synergy for inspiration. Let's see here. Yeah, 45 different games. It's bonkers that we got so many this year. Oh, G-Master, would you consider running Burning Wheel? So I actually don't know. I will tell you that whatever it is, like 450 or 600 page rule book for Burning Wheel has always put me off of it. So I really don't know enough about the game. It's not, I would never say no to any game on the channel to giving a try, at least. I mean, there are exceptions to that for certain reasons. You know, if it's because we're playing the games publicly, if a certain creator is, I don't know, the word problematic has become so fucking devoid of its meaning. But like, if I don't want to highlight somebody's work on the channel, I won't run the game on the channel. But Burning Wheel is not one of those ones. It's just one of those like memory holes in my RPG experience. It's like Superworld. I've never run Superworld before, you know. I've never owned it. I've never read it. Burning Wheel it's not, I don't know. I definitely would give it a consideration if I owned it. It's just not a game that I have ever owned. You miss my Inigo Montoya mustache. I do not. My Sex Pest mustache is not something I miss whatsoever. Let's see here. Might try going back to D6 WEG. Yeah, I need to give that game a better shake as well. I think that there's no worse environment to appreciate a game than a one-shot from the GM side. If it is a game you're running the first time, at least, let me add that caveat. If a game runs smoothly and I have to prep it for a one-shot and I've never run it before, that can be just like I can walk away from that adoring the game forever, like Lex Arcana. WEG, I struggled with a couple of things with it because I didn't quite understand how some of the rules worked, or they worked so different from what I was expecting from other games like Fantasy Flight. Fantasy Flight Star Wars offers a play experience that is unlike any other, not just for Star Wars, but the Genesis system offers a kind of experience that's so different from any other kind of RPG. The way that the proprietary dice give you dice results that are so unusual sometimes, it leads to scenes that just you don't have in any other RPG, or at least not many. And I think I had just had a session I ran of FFG Star Wars that was really, really good. And when I ran WEG Star Wars again, all I could think of was, it's not doing this, it's not doing this, it's not doing this. And so I didn't give it a very good shake when we started running it this year, because I really just wanted to run FFG Star Wars. Maybe what I need to do is try again next year with WEG Star Wars and just use that instead of trying to do something different. I will say WEG Star Wars it's slow in combat. The whole like rolling soak and shit like that. Like that is something that my own impatience with slow moving combat systems where there isn't interesting decisions that are taking up that time is just fucking math. I've never really been a fan of soak rolls in RPGs because of that kind of thing. It's just so tedious to be like, and I'm going to roll this and I'm going to roll this and calculate this. And like the rationale behind those kinds of game decisions, I absolutely understand and I get what they're doing. But from a time perspective, when I'm spending so much fucking time doing all that stuff, that was an issue I had with it. But it's worth, you know what, I think that I need to give it a shake again without the specter of the Fantasy Flight, a good session with Fantasy Flight hanging over it. If I'd had a bad session with the FFG one, which does happen also, because that game also gets a little time consuming with dice results, it can also, with a group that isn't, you know, keeping things moving, it can be tedious as fuck. So maybe I just need either a bad session with another Star Wars game or just come into it with a fresh perspective. So maybe I need to give that a try again. And I know like a lot of people really loved WEG Star Wars too. So let's see here. The Fallout one ended with a bang. It most definitely did. Mothership is a cool game. Great to hear. Let's see here. Draco Demoner. Thank you, Ingolf. That is Och Demoner. That is the Swedish version, I guess. What else? I don't see. Do you have a GM routine that you're willing to share? I love your work, but it's quite unique how quick you and your players pick it up. Oh, okay. Thanks, Moonrot. So, there's a couple things that I do as far as prepping. Anytime I get a new game, my concern, my thought is, how fast can I get this to the table? Because I'm going to learn things and I'm going to start seeing things happen at the table. So the prep work I prioritize is, what do I need to know in order to get this to the table? Sometimes there are games that really grip me and I want to read them cover to cover before I get them to the table. But more often than not, I'm prioritizing, what do I need to know, you know, in order to get this to the table? And often that's focusing on the rules and enough about the setting that I need in order to get it to the table. I don't need to answer questions about every single thing about the setting, and it's perfectly fine to say, I have no idea. You know, if players have questions about elements of the setting, and it's also perfectly fine to get things wrong or to make them up on your own, but that is one of the primary things I do. I also try and make sure I have, if it is a game that, actually, Marvel Multiverse is a great example of this. I think that game would benefit from character sheets that have the full rules for the powers on each of them, because obviously they can't do that for page length in it, but that game requires you to understand what the various powers do that your character has, because they're not like air control, it's specific iterations of using that ability, and each of those has different rules to them, and they're also often different action types, and that game has different action types in it, just like, you know, D&D 3rd going forward and a lot of other games. That game, but when you have handouts that have little reference things on that game runs so much better and so much smoother. It feels like you're snapping along, people are making interesting decisions as the game is designed to do, without having to look up stuff or having to remember what 10 or 12 powers actually do. So with that game, I will prep a handout for each character to make sure that they can, at a glance, see what their characters can do. I don't need to do that for every game, but if there are reference sheets for, you know, like types of actions or narrative metacurrency spends like momentum or, stunt points in Age, I'll make sure I've got those accessible for the players as well. And I try to, when I'm prepping, think of how I'm going to focus a first-time play as well. I want to make sure that when I'm getting a game to the table, I'm not like, there are certain games like the One Ring where I intentionally did not focus, or I said, this part is going to be really focused, but after this, you guys can do whatever the hell you want. I try to anticipate what questions players may have, and I'm fortunate to have, had a bunch of players let me get a bunch of games to the table, so experience shows, what things you need to touch on. If you're playing a mystery, for instance, it often is helpful to remind players, we are playing a mystery. The way that these stories unfold is you'll meet people, you'll gather information, you'll try and figure out a resolution to the mystery. That's the narrative gameplay loop, or the gameplay loop in that game, as opposed to a dungeon crawl, or as opposed to a traditional story where something's going to prompt action and then characters are going to go along with the story. Or if you're playing a game that has a more regimented structure that the characters fit in, you can put a clear mission. Here's what I assume you're doing. You've been assigned to go to planet X and do Y. You have been hired to do so-and-so. You've agreed to work with X, Y, Z and explore, whatever the heck you're going to. So by sort of focusing what I'm intending on doing with that first session, that'll let me get it to the table. And then once I get it to the table, I will learn then what things I need to do the next time I get it, right? Like, I really should have looked up and had access for the weather conditions because we're referencing that quite a bit. Or I should have had reference to, I don't know, one of the things that Twilight 2000 doesn't have on the GM screen is the modifiers for like foraging and travel and things like that. So it'll be good to have that stuff on accessible for players to look at. If you're playing a game that has different types of actions and specific meanings for them, having a list of that is also very helpful. So the prep involves what stuff do I need to know in order to get this to the table, and what stuff do I need to have for the players to make it easy for them to engage with the game as fast as possible. I can tell you, like, my prep for I'll give you two examples. My prep for the Fading Suns is going to involve a lot of player handouts and explanations of kind of how things work, because there's a lot of moving parts in that game. And in contrast, our Rollmaster one, when I ran our Rollmaster one, which used a bunch of pre-gens, I wrote a little intro document for the players to tell them, like, this is how Rollmaster's default setting of Shadow World. I know it's not always been their default setting, but it is now. The default setting of Shadow World, here's how it differs from the other things that you may be familiar with and what make it unique. D&D in 4th edition did a really good thing where they would give you like a number of things to know that make the setting unique, like either 8 or 10. And they did that for Eberron, for Dark Sun, for I don't know if they did for Forgotten Realms, but it's something they've carried over into the new versions, 5th edition. And it's just a really helpful way of having the players understand that stuff. I also had for that game, because it's very chart heavy, every character had a full list of their spells as well as descriptions, a full list of their all the tables they use for their weapons, so they would have access to that. And then little blurbs about like what the stats meant, not the stats, but their abilities were. Sort of like, your character's good at X or Y, so you may want to lean into those things. That's sort of, broadly speaking, how I approach every single game I'll prep. For ongoing campaigns, I have spurts where I'll kind of flesh out possibilities for longer term, but with players who are as reactive and as proactive and as willing to go where where it makes sense for their characters and their story, I tend to do more skeletal structures for adventures and for stories in every campaign, rather than specific scripted narratives or specific adventures, until I know we're spending time in a place. So like on our Traveler thing, I had a whole series of possible things that might be happening at one of the planets they went to, Hilfer. And the players ended up falling, like, at first it seemed to me as if like they weren't going to engage with some of the stuff that might have been there, and that didn't matter because I could use that shit elsewhere. But then they did, and we had a really memorable outcome on that planet. So It's a matter of sort of overall making sure you know what you need to do, and you're only busy during that time. You know, do the work that is necessary, nothing beyond that. Kevin Crawford talks a lot about that in all of his games, to do what's necessary and don't do anything beyond it if it isn't fun. I don't know if I agree with that. Sometimes you got to do stuff that just is necessary for the players, like, you know, getting images of certain tables or things like that. But that's the thing I would say, is like, figure out what is absolutely necessary for you to do for the game and whatever for that particular session, and nothing more than that, because things are going to change based on what players do. And also be willing to add shit in on the fly too. Then it's easier to add to a looser structure than it is a more formal one. So anyway, I hope that is helpful, and hope that answers your question in part. Let's see here. Star Wars WEG with a Dark Andor inspired campaign. I 100% agree. That is that would be really, really great. Oh, thanks, Stephen Merlin. Very kind words. Then I think I've answered all the questions, or at least the specific questions that were had. I apologize if I overlooked. I'm trying to read through quickly while scrolling. It has been, I will say as well, just a fantastic year. It's been very busy on the channel and the day job, you know, but it has been, the channel itself has been an enormous amount of fun to be managing, and the games to run. I get to play with some terrific players and friends. And I've gotten to know a number of the members of the community as well. I am not as diligent at responding to every comment. In particular, we've had a lot of people who have been working their way through the Night Below campaign, and I'm sorry that I haven't been able to respond more quickly to some of your questions. Some of those is because it's a question about a specific session, you know, in a 215 session campaign that happened 3 years ago, and I can't remember. So in order to answer the question, I would have to go back and rewatch part of the session. And that's not always just, time doesn't always afford that. But I've talked to people on Discord, and I've interacted with a couple of people on by email. My apologies if I have not responded to your email yet. I'm sorry. THX, I think you emailed me just before the holidays, and I have not got back to you. I apologize for that. I will get back to you in time. But a huge thank you to everybody who plays on the channel, who watches the channel, who joins us in the Discord, who leaves comments, who sends emails. I love this hobby so much, and the people who are involved with it make it so much fun it's work, obviously, you know, because doing anything involves any kind of work to maintain the channel and run games, but I love this work so much, and it's because of the people I get to play games with, talk games with, you know, and interact with on it. And also seeing you all interact with each other is just so fucking cool. We talk about it being the Dungeon Musings community, but it is just so good seeing other cool gamers play with other cool gamers, and see people talk about exciting games that I had not thought about, or in ways that I had not thought about running. I have reaped the benefits of the advice of the community this year with Mithras, and with Dragon Age for next year, and with Lex Arcana, you know, and it makes this effort to maintain the channel, you know, it shocks me that we're going into our 10th year now of doing it. But I will keep doing this as long as I am able to, because it is always so much fun and so rewarding to learn more and to interact with more people, and to get a chance to get other people to, you know, get other games to the table. It's just awesome stuff. My absolute favorite hobby, and it is such a pleasure to share it with you all. So thank you for your time, your interaction, and your enthusiasm for all these games. The last thing I should talk about is D&D 5th edition. So Night Below, we are currently on Wednesdays in Night Below. Night Below's been on a hiatus. It's our longest running campaign, but it's been on hiatus since May of last year. I don't know if we're getting back to it before May. We'll probably get back to it, but before then. But we do intend to get back to that story. There have just been changes in people's circumstances and availabilities and whatnot that have made us have to think about what we're doing with our Wednesday sessions. And then also right now, there's a number of players who are sci-fi fans who have never played Traveler before, and I really wanted to introduce them to the game. And we're also sort of waiting for the 2025 now Monster Manual to come out for 5th edition, so we can see that. And but we're not done with the Night Below characters and campaign yet. It's just a matter of we've been spending extended times for reasons doing other things and exploring other things. So the enthusiasm that some of the new players, our new viewers, have had for those characters is so grateful. It's so cool to hear people experiencing some of the moments that we had in that campaign for the first time, like the 200th episode, or the resolution of Heathertop Warren, or dealing with Lord Carmen, for the first time. It's wonderful seeing folks having the same or similar reactions to what we did when we were encountering it. We're not done with that story. We're not done with those characters. We just having had circumstances have forced us to be away from them for a time. So we will be getting back to that. And that's where 5th edition is likely to come back in as well. I should say there's a non-zero chance we might go back to Eberron with 5th edition this year as well, because there is a lot of folks who were fans of that particular pairing, myself included. And we did, I think it was 2024 where we did have a one-shot of it that was a shit ton of fun too. So that may have been 2 years ago now, but in any event, if you are a fan of actual D&D, whether that's 2nd, 3rd, whatever, it's still going to be on the list for this year. I just did not include it in the list of an otherwise long list of games. So anyway, with that, I'll do one last check here to make sure that excellent. I've DM'd since 1977, but rarely get to play. Yeah, I hear that. This is forever DM. I hear that. I did make a list, though, of the games I wanted to play this year. And they were, PF2 for sure, because I love that fucking game. And what were my other ones? I might as well share that, because it was, let's see here. Where am I? It was in the assorted games. I'm trying to tell them, Anna. Hold on. I know. Anna Banana has been very patient today. Pathfinder 2nd edition. Wrath and Glory, the 40K game, because they have a supplement for Eldar, and I fucking love the Eldar, and it's so cool that they've got an RPG supplement for Eldar. Savage World Supers, because I think it's my favorite superhero RPG. Call of Cthulhu, because I loved playing Call of Cthulhu as a kid, and Cult Divinity Lost, because it is my favorite horror RPG. I fucking love running that game. I didn't include that on the list as well, too, because it's assumed I'm going to get Cult to the table at some point this year. As is a Conan game, too. You may notice we didn't mention a Conan game. The Conan Monolith game comes out in 2025. We're for fucking sure going to be running that game on the channel. Anyway, I'll wrap things up here. I hope that everyone had a restful holiday. If you're able to take the break over the holiday, I hope your 2025 is off to a terrific start thus far. Thank you so much for joining us for any or some of the games I'm telling them for 2024. And I hope you will join us at the table for some games in 2025. Oh my God, I have 2 things I forgot. Save them best for last. The charity campaign for this year and the 10th anniversary game. God, Madison. Jesus, Bush League fucking host. All right, so let's talk about the 10th anniversary game. My goodness. Thank you. That's what Anna was reminding me of. So, for the 10th anniversary, we are going to be running a monthly game. And this game is, I even got the stupid handout, Shadow of the Weird Wizard by Robert Schwab. This game is a successor to the Shadow of the Demon Lord game, which is one of the games we started the channel with. And I loved that game. The only thing I wasn't crazy about is that you were limited to 10 levels, and then they added rules to expand afterwards. But the idea was 10 adventures, 10 levels, and then you're done with those characters. Excellent thing, unless you are someone like me who wants to keep playing games for fucking ever. So to hit the middle ground. Shadow of the Weird Wizard came out late 2024 in print. It looks fucking awesome. It is a great game. Shadow of the Demon Lord was a terrific one book game in the sense of like you can pick up an RPG with one book and run it forever. This does have 2 books to it now, with the Shadow of the Weird Secrets of the Weird Wizard GM's book. But this is the kind of game, honestly, like I haven't got off the table yet. This would be a strong contender for a Desert Island game. I'm not sure I would need more than what is in here. The Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff that was really great about the first one was that every level you had really cool and interesting decisions to choose from to what you did with your character, whether it was to select certain abilities or spells or to move into a new path. Because characters were made up of 4 components: a ancestry, a novice path, a expert path, and a master path. Each of those paths you could think of as classes. So you could have a character who is very much like a traditional fighter or paladin or wizard, or you could have a weird mishmash of certain things. And this has carried over that idea, and also made some improvements or some refinements to the rules mechanics in it. The game looks incredible, and what we're gonna do, once a month we'll play the game, and then the characters will go up a level in between, and a year will pass minimum. We're going to see where the story goes, but we're going to see these characters over the course of the year go from fledgling novices, and characters may die and be replaced over the course of this. We're going real gloves off as far as the lethality is concerned, but they will go, and every level they'll go up, and the year will pass, and as they grow in power and the world is shaped by what decisions they make, it will hopefully make for a truly epic campaign. I played, my buddy Jared Rasher ran a 10-part Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign like 8-9 years ago that I played in, and it was really, really fun going through that same process of leveling up your character after each adventure. So we're going to try and recapture some of that, and we'll celebrate our 10th year of the channel doing something we did before. And finally, our charity session for this year. Okay, so what I'm going to be trying, something that we have not done before, we're combining one thing we typically used to do, on an annual basis on the channel with something that video game streamers do. And we are going to be running a gaming marathon. That is going to be our charity marathon for the year. It is probably going to still support the same charity, SOS Children's Villages International, but it will be a marathon 16-hour session where we're starting with a game and characters, and then people will change throughout the day. Some may stay for most or some or all of it. And over the course of that 16 hours thing, we'll keep playing and we'll keep seeing characters do things. To that end, we needed to find a game that would suit that kind of like people dropping in, dropping out without it disrupting the story. And to that end, we're returning to a game we have played a bit on the channel and did enjoy a lot, Forbidden Lands. So that is the Free League, old school sandbox style setting. We're going to have a host of pre-gens for the players to play, and in the event their characters die, for them to be replaced. 16 hours is actually less time than what we spent on our holiday session this year. So it does not mean that we're really going to be able to, you can get less done than what you think, but I think it's going to be I think that is enough time to do some really interesting stuff. We're going to have ways for donors to the charity to be able to affect the gameplay and interact with the gameplay. So that will hopefully make it a compelling watch for you. And we're going to have it archived afterwards as well. But yeah, we're going to try something different to focus the fundraising efforts for just one event throughout the year, see how that goes, and do something bonkers. I am already in training to run a game for 16 hours, and we probably will be breaking it up into 4-hour chunks where we're taking a break and talking to chat and grabbing a bite to eat and whatnot. We always take a break every 2 hours or so, but that's probably that is the plan, and we'll do 4 increments of that spreading out over an entire day. And we'll be seeing folks from all the time zones that we play in too. So that way the folks who are in European time zones and the folks who are in North American time zones can all participate. And with luck, we might even see someone from the Asia Pacific region as well. I have not approached him yet, but my fingers are crossed. We may have a special guest star surprise us with a joining us for the session. But anyways, that's the plan for the charity this year. My apologies. I'm a little scatterbrained. I got too much crap that are here. At the very least, whether it's successful or not, I think it is going to be a ton of fun to play, because Forbidden Lands is a shit ton of fun. A lot of what I love about Twilight 2000 is the survival mechanics, and they're very much adapted from this sucker. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Now I've talked about everything we have planned for the year. Holy smokes. If I hadn't turned around and saw the book sitting there, I don't know. Anyway, I will finish with my outro. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I don't have any other things to plug. Our partnership with Noble Knight Games continues. I just didn't include the link in the description of the video. And the donation link will still work for Hero Save Villages if you'd like to, but we're not going to be announcing it every session for this coming year, other than the build up for the charity marathon. As is always the case, though, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the overview, the games we played this year, or what we got planned for the coming year, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll endeavor to reply in a timely fashion. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending your time with us today on the channel, at any other point, on the Discord server, writing emails to me. Thank you so much for joining us with this journey of the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. And as always, I hope that your year is off to a terrific start. We hope that we gave you a few hours to take your mind off the troubles of our world and think about the plans we have for the coming year and where we've been in the past year. And until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy gaming.